The October wind swept through the cobblestone streets of Dubrovnik's old town, carrying with it the scent of the Adriatic Sea and the distant sound of church bells. Marina Kovač smoothed down her emerald dress for the 10th time that evening, her fingers trembling slightly as she stood before the ornate entrance of the rector's palace. The wedding invitation felt heavy in her clutch, a reminder of everything she'd tried to forget over the past 3 months. She hadn't wanted to come. When the invitation arrived at her small apartment in Lapad, addressed to Marina Kovač and guest, she'd almost thrown it away. Her cousin Petra's wedding should have been a joyous occasion, but all Marina could think about was how she'd have to face her entire family alone. No date, no explanation that would satisfy her mother's probing questions or silence her aunt's pitying looks. The palace courtyard was already filled with guests, their laughter echoing off the Renaissance columns that had stood for centuries. String lights were woven through the arches, casting a warm glow over the celebration. Marina recognized faces from her childhood, neighbors from Bruges, old school friends, distant relatives she'd managed to avoid for years. She took a deep breath and stepped inside, immediately gravitating toward the far corner where she hoped to remain invisible. If you're enjoying this story, please subscribe and let us know in the comments where you're watching from. Now let's continue. The ceremony had been beautiful. Petra looked radiant in her lace gown, her new husband beaming as they exchanged vows in Croatian and Italian, honoring both families. Marina had watched from the back row, fighting the tears that threatened to fall. Not tears of joy, but of something more complicated, a mix of loneliness and regret that settled in her chest like a stone. Now, at the reception, she found herself at a small table near the back, partially hidden by a marble pillar. Most guests were already seated in groups, families clustered together, friends laughing over shared memories. Marina's assigned table was full of elderly relatives she barely knew, and after exchanging pleasantries, she'd excused herself to this solitary spot. She watched couples dance to the live band playing traditional klapa music, their voices harmonizing in a way that made her heart ache. Drinking alone at a Croatian wedding, a deep voice said beside her, "That's practically a crime." Marina turned, startled, to find a man standing there. He was tall, probably in his mid-30s, with dark hair swept back and eyes the color of Turkish coffee. His suit was impeccably tailored, charcoal grey with subtle pinstripes, and he wore it with the kind of confidence that came from power, not money. There was something dangerous in the way he held himself, controlled, calculated, like a predator deciding whether to pounce. "I'm not drinking alone," Marina replied, gesturing to her untouched glass of champagne. "I'm drinking with excellent company. Mine." His lips curved into a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. "Viktor Maric," he said, extending his hand. "And you are?" "Leaving soon," she said, but took his hand anyway. His grip was firm, warm. "Marina Kovač." "Ah, the bride's cousin." His eyes traveled over her face with an intensity that made her skin tingle. "I've heard about you." "Nothing good, I hope." "On the contrary." He pulled out the chair beside her and sat down without invitation. "They say you're the smart one, the one who escaped to Zagreb for university and never looked back." Marina felt her defenses rising. "I visit." "But you don't stay." It wasn't a question. Viktor leaned back in his chair, studying her with those dark eyes. "Tell me, Marina Kovač, why is a beautiful woman sitting alone at a wedding, looking like she'd rather be anywhere else?" "Maybe I like my own company." "Maybe," he agreed. "Or maybe your ex-boyfriend is here with his new girlfriend, and you're trying very hard not to look at them." Marina's head snapped up. "How did you—" "The tall one by the bar? Brown hair, too much gel? He's been glancing over here every few minutes, and the blonde next to him keeps shooting you looks that could freeze the Adriatic." Viktor's expression remained neutral, but there was something calculating in his gaze. "Am I wrong?" She wanted to lie, but what was the point? No, she admitted quietly. You're not wrong. Luca. Of course he was here. Petra had been friends with his sister. 3 months since he'd ended things, claiming he needed space to find himself, only to be with someone new within 2 weeks. Marina had convinced herself she was over it, that she didn't care anymore. But seeing him here, looking happy, while she sat alone like some tragic figure, made all those old wounds fresh again. Then let me make you an offer, Victor said, his voice dropping lower. He leaned in close enough that she could smell his cologne, something expensive and woody, with notes of cedar and leather. Pretend I'm your date tonight. Marina blinked. What? You need a date. I need... He paused, his jaw tightening almost imperceptibly. Let's say I need to appear otherwise engaged this evening. We help each other. That's ridiculous. We just met. Exactly. No complications, no expectations. Just 2 people helping each other survive a wedding. His eyes held hers, and there was something in their depths that suggested this was more than a casual offer. What do you say, Marina? Give your ex something to think about, and spare yourself your family's pity. She should have said no. Everything about this man screamed danger, from the way other guests seemed to give him a wide berth, to the tension in his shoulders, like he was constantly prepared for a threat. But then she caught sight of Luca laughing at something his girlfriend said, his hand resting possessively on her waist, and something in Marina snapped. Fine, she said, meeting Victor's gaze. But just for tonight. Just for tonight, he echoed. And that dangerous smile returned. He stood and offered his hand. Then shall we begin? I believe they're about to serve dinner, and it would be a shame for you to eat alone. Marina took his hand, feeling the calluses on his palm, not the hands of a businessman, but of someone who'd done harder work. As they walked together toward the main dining area, she felt the weight of eyes on them. Whispers rippled through the crowd like wind through wheat fields. Her mother spotted her first. Marina Kovač's eyes widened as she took in the sight of her daughter on the arm of a stranger, a handsome one at that. Marina could read the questions forming on her mother's lips from across the room. Smile, Victor murmured, his hand settling at the small of her back. We're supposed to be enjoying ourselves. I don't even know you, she whispered back. You know enough. I'm Victor. I find you fascinating, and I'm completely devoted to making sure you have a wonderful evening. His voice carried that same dangerous edge, smooth as expensive raquija. Everything else is details. They reached a table near the front, and Marina realized with a start that this wasn't her assigned seat. This was a table reserved for close family and important guests. Before she could protest, Victor pulled out her chair with practiced ease. Victor! Petra's father, Marina's uncle Tomislav, appeared beside them, his weathered face breaking into a wide smile. We weren't sure you'd make it. And Marina, Draga, when did you two... He looked between them, confusion and curiosity warring on his features. We've been keeping it quiet, Tomo, Victor said smoothly, using a familiarity with her uncle that suggested they knew each other well. You know how it is. Marina wanted to be sure before introducing me to the family. Marina's mind reeled. Victor knew her uncle. How? And why was Tomislav accepting this explanation so readily, looking almost pleased about it? Of course, Tomislav said, clapping Victor on the shoulder. Well, I'm glad you're here, both of you. Sit. Dinner will be served shortly. As her uncle walked away, Marina turned to Victor with wide eyes. You know him? I know a lot of people in Dubrovnik, Victor replied, his expression unreadable. It's necessary for my work. What work? Import-export, he said, the answer too vague to be entirely truthful. But tonight isn't about business. Tonight is about making sure your ex-boyfriend regrets every decision he's ever made. Despite herself, Marina felt a laugh bubble up. There was something absurdly thrilling about this entire situation. Here she was at her cousin's wedding with a complete stranger who somehow knew her family, pretending to be his date. It was madness. It was possibly the most reckless thing she'd done in years. And God help her, she was enjoying it. The dinner service began. Pekka with octopus and potatoes, fresh bread from local bakeries, salads dressed with olive oil from Pelja. Victor proved to be an attentive companion, keeping up a steady stream of conversation that kept her relatives engaged without revealing too much about himself. He asked about her work at the publishing house in Zagreb, seemed genuinely interested in the manuscript she edited, and managed to deflect personal questions with such skill that Marina barely noticed he'd revealed nothing about himself. "You're good at this," she said quietly as the main course was cleared and dessert, struckle and fritule, was brought out. At what? Being mysterious. Charming everyone while telling them nothing. She tilted her head, studying him. "Why do I get the feeling this isn't the first time you've pretended to be someone's date?" Victor's expression darkened slightly. "Because you're perceptive. Another reason they call you the smart one." He reached for his wine glass, the movement casual but somehow controlled. "But I'm not pretending about everything, Marina." "What do you mean?" Before he could answer, the band struck up a new song, a slow melody that had couples moving toward the dance floor. Victor stood and extended his hand. "Dance with me." It wasn't a question, but Marina took his hand anyway. As they moved onto the floor, she became acutely aware of how close they were, Victor's hand firm against her back, his other hand engulfing hers. He moved with surprising grace for such a large man, leading her through the steps with practiced ease. "You haven't asked me the important question yet," Victor said, his breath warm against her ear. "What question?" "Why I needed you to pretend to be my date." Marina pulled back slightly to look at him. "You said you needed to appear otherwise engaged. From what, though?" His eyes scanned the crowd, settling on someone near the bar. Marina followed his gaze and saw a woman in a red dress, beautiful and cold as winter, watching them with an expression of barely contained fury. "That's Katarina Babic. We were involved. She doesn't handle endings well." "And you thought dragging me into this was a good idea?" "I thought," Victor said, pulling her closer as the song swelled, "that helping each other was better than suffering alone. Was I wrong?" Marina caught sight of Luca over Victor's shoulder. Her ex was watching them dance, his expression a mix of surprise and something that might have been jealousy. His girlfriend was tugging at his arm, clearly annoyed that his attention was elsewhere. "No," Marina admitted, "you weren't wrong." They danced through 2 more songs, and with each passing moment, Marina found herself relaxing into Victor's embrace. There was something solid about him, something that made her feel protected despite knowing almost nothing about who he really was. Other couples gave them space on the floor, whether out of respect or fear, Marina couldn't tell. When the band took a break, Victor led her back to their table, where her mother was waiting with barely contained excitement. "Marina, Lyubavi, you must introduce us properly," Bozhena said, her eyes bright with curiosity. "Victor, is it?" "Viktor Maric, Gospodjo Kovač," he said, taking her mother's hand with courteous grace. "It's a pleasure to finally meet you. Marina speaks of you often." "Does she?" Bozhena shot her daughter a look that clearly said they would be having a long conversation later. "And how did you two meet?" Marina opened her mouth, realized she had no prepared answer, and felt panic rising. But Victor didn't miss a beat. "At a bookshop in Zagreb," he said smoothly. "I was looking for a particular edition of Krleja's work, and Marina helped me find it. We started talking about literature and..." He glanced at Marina with an expression that looked almost genuine. "Well, some conversations are worth continuing." Her mother practically glowed. "A man who reads Krillija. Marina, why didn't you tell me?" "It's new, Mama," Marina said, finding her voice. "We wanted to be sure before making announcements." "Yes, yes," Bozhena said, waving her hand. "But you brought him to a family wedding, Draga. That says something." After her mother left to spread what would undoubtedly become exaggerated gossip, Marina turned to Victor. "Krillija, you said you work in publishing. It seemed appropriate." He lifted his wineglass. "Besides, I do read, among other things. Other things like evading questions and making up elaborate backstories." "Also that," he agreed, and this time his smile seemed genuine, reaching those dark eyes. "You're handling this well, Marina. Better than I expected." "What did you expect?" "Panic, questions, maybe for you to bolt after the first dance." He studied her face. "But you haven't. Why?" Marina considered the question. Why was she still here, playing along with this charade? Maybe because for the first time in months she didn't feel like the pathetic ex-girlfriend everyone pitied. Maybe because Victor's presence beside her made her feel powerful, desired, interesting. Or maybe because there was something thrilling about stepping outside her careful, controlled life, even if just for one evening. "Because," she said finally, "sometimes it's easier to be someone else for a night, even if that someone is your pretend girlfriend." Victor's expression shifted, something unreadable crossing his features. "Yes," he said quietly. "Sometimes it is." The evening wore on. Marina found herself laughing more than she had in months, trading stories with Victor that were probably half-truths on his part, but entertaining nonetheless. He told her about growing up in Dubrovnik, about learning to navigate boats before he could ride a bicycle, about the way the city changed when tourist season ended and it became theirs again. "You love it here," Marina observed. "I do. It's home." He paused. "But I understand why you left. Dubrovnik is beautiful, but it can be suffocating. Everyone knows everyone. Every secret shared over coffee becomes public knowledge by evening. Sometimes you need distance to become who you're meant to be." "Is that what you think I did? Isn't it?" Victor's gaze held hers. "You left to become Marina the editor, the woman who reads manuscripts and discovers new voices. Not Marina the Kovač girl, daughter and cousin, and whatever other roles this place tried to assign you." She wanted to tell him he was wrong, but he wasn't. That was exactly why she'd left, why she only came back for obligatory visits. In Zagreb, she could be anyone. Here, she would always be the girl who'd left. "And what about you?" Marina asked. "What role does Dubrovnik assign you?" Victor's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. "One, I'm trying to change." Before she could press further, the music changed to something upbeat and traditional. Guests flooded the dance floor for a kolo, the circle dance that was mandatory at every Croatian wedding. Victor pulled her up, and suddenly they were part of the spinning circle, hands linked with her cousins and aunts and uncles, moving in synchronized steps that Marina's feet remembered, even if her mind had forgotten. The energy was infectious. Marina found herself laughing, breathless, as the circle spun faster. Victor moved beside her with surprising ease, this dangerous man who somehow fit perfectly into this moment of pure, uncomplicated joy. When the dance ended, and they stumbled off the floor, both breathing hard, Marina felt lighter than she had in months. Victor steadied her with a hand at her elbow, his touch warm through the fabric of her dress. "Thank you," she said suddenly. "For what?" "For this, for making tonight bearable, for—" She gestured helplessly. "All of it." Victor's expression softened. "Marina!" "Victor!" A man's voice cut through the moment, sharp and commanding. They both turned to find a stocky man in an expensive suit approaching, flanked by two others who looked like they'd be more comfortable in a boxing ring than at a wedding. A word. The temperature seemed to drop 10 degrees. Victor's entire demeanor changed in an instant. The charming date disappeared, replaced by someone harder, colder. Petar, this isn't the time or place. I think it is. Petar's eyes flicked to Marina, dismissive and calculating. Send the girl away. This is business. The lady stays, Victor said, his voice quiet but carrying an edge that made Marina's skin prickle. Whatever you have to say can wait until tomorrow. No, it can't. Petar stepped closer, and Marina noticed the bulge under his jacket that could only be a weapon. Her heart began to pound. Davor wants to know why you've been blocking the shipment. You're making problems, Victor. Problems have consequences. Marina felt Victor's hand tighten on her arm. Not here, he repeated. Not at Tomo's daughter's wedding. Have some respect. Respect? Petar laughed, the sound harsh. You want to talk about respect? You've been making moves without permission, Maric. That's not how things work. The conversation was coded, but Marina wasn't stupid. Import-export, Victor had said. But this wasn't about legitimate business. This was about something else entirely, something dangerous that had nothing to do with cargo manifests and shipping schedules. Marina, Victor said without looking at her, his voice still controlled but strained. Go back to the table. No, she heard herself say. Both men looked at her in surprise. Marina's hands were shaking, but she lifted her chin. I'm not leaving you. Something flickered in Victor's eyes. Surprise, maybe admiration. Petar just looked annoyed. The girlfriend's loyal. How sweet. But this doesn't concern you, Devoika. Walk away while you can. Everything concerning Victor concerns me, Marina said, the lie coming easier now. She moved closer to him, possessive, claiming. And whatever business you think you have with him can wait until after we leave. Together. Petar studied them both, his expression shrewd. Then, surprisingly, he stepped back. Fine. But Victor, you and I are going to have a conversation. Soon, don't make me come looking for you. He left with his men, disappearing into the crowd like sharks returning to deep water. Marina realized she was gripping Victor's arm hard enough to leave marks. I'm sorry, she whispered. I shouldn't have. You were perfect, Victor said, and when he looked at her, his expression was unguarded for the first time that evening. Absolutely perfect. But Marina, you need to understand something. What? I'm not a good man. I'm involved in things that would make you run screaming if you knew the full truth. His hand came up to cup her face, thumb brushing her cheekbone. This was supposed to be simple. A few hours of pretending, then we part ways and forget this ever happened. But I can't have you mixed up in my world. It's too dangerous. Marina's heart was pounding, but not from fear. Then why do I feel safer with you than I have with anyone in months? Because you don't know what I am. Then tell me. Victor's jaw worked, conflict clear on his face. I can't. Not here, not. He glanced around at the wedding guests, at the life she'd built separate from this place. You should go back to Zagreb tomorrow and forget you ever met me. And if I don't want to forget, Marina, I'm not stupid, Victor. I know you're involved in something illegal. The way people look at you, the way Petar talked, I can put the pieces together. She took a breath. But for some insane reason, I trust you, and I don't want this to end. He stared at her like she'd spoken in a foreign language. You trust me. I know. It's crazy. We've known each other for a few hours, and most of what you've told me is probably lies, and I still trust you. She laughed, slightly hysterical. What does that say about me? That you see something I thought I'd buried a long time ago, Victor said quietly. His hand was still on her face, and he leaned closer, his forehead almost touching hers. "Marina, if I kiss you right now, this stops being pretend. You understand that?" "I understand. And you still—" She kissed him first, cutting off his question. His lips were warm, tasting of wine and something darker, more complex. For a heartbeat he was still, surprised. Then his hand slid into her hair, and he was kissing her back, deep and fierce, like she was oxygen and he'd been drowning. They broke apart when someone cleared their throat nearby. Marina's face burned as she realized they'd drawn attention, including her mother's wide-eyed stare from across the room and Luca's thunderous expression from the bar. "Well," Victor said, his voice rough, "I suppose that settles the question of whether this was convincing. Victor, come with me." He took her hand, leading her away from the reception, through the palace corridors she remembered from childhood tours. They emerged onto a terrace overlooking the city, the Adriatic stretching dark and infinite beyond the ancient walls. The sounds of the wedding faded to a distant hum. "This is real now," Victor said, turning to face her. "You need to know what you're getting into." "Then tell me. The truth this time." He was quiet for a long moment, staring out at the sea. When he spoke, his voice was careful, measured. "My family has been involved in Dubrovnik's underground for 3 generations. Shipping, mostly. Things that can't go through official channels. Weapons sometimes. Other cargo I'm not proud of." He glanced at her. "I took over when my father died 5 years ago. I've been trying to make it legitimate, to transition into legal business. But there are people who don't want change. People like Davor, Petar's boss. That's what Petar meant. You're blocking their shipments. I'm refusing to transport certain things. Drugs, specifically. There's a line I won't cross, and that's making me enemies." His hands gripped the terrace railing. "I'm working with someone, a government contact who's promised me immunity if I help bring down the trafficking networks. But it's dangerous, Marina. Very dangerous. People die in this world." Marina processed this, her mind racing. She should be terrified, should be running back to the safety of the wedding and her normal, boring life. But instead she asked, "What do you need?" "What?" "You're fighting to go legitimate, to bring down the bad actors. What do you need to make that happen?" Victor stared at her like she was a puzzle he couldn't solve. "Why are you asking me that?" "Because clearly you're doing something good, even if the methods are questionable, and because—" She took a breath. "Because I meant what I said. I don't want this to end. You barely know me. I know you helped me tonight when you didn't have to. I know you're trying to change your world, even though it would be easier not to. I know you read Collegia and dance the colo and look at me like I'm the most fascinating thing you've ever seen." She moved closer. "That's enough to start with." Victor caught her hands, holding them between his own. "If you do this, if you stay in my life, there's no going back. Your family will find out what I am. Your ex-boyfriend's jealousy will be the least of your problems. You'll be connected to me, and that comes with risks. I edit manuscripts for a living, Victor. I'm ready for a little risk." He laughed, the sound surprised and genuine. "A little risk. Marina, you have no idea what you're signing up for. Then show me." Something shifted in his expression, resignation mixed with something that might have been hope. "Stay," he said. "Stay in Dubrovnik for a few more days. Let me show you my world, and then you can decide if you really want this." "If you want me." "I already know I want you. You know what you think you want. Reality is different than a few hours at a wedding." His thumb traced circles on her palm. "But if you're serious, stay. Get to know the real Victor Maric, not just the man who pretended to be your date." Marina knew she should think about this logically, should consider her job in Zagreb, her responsibilities, her carefully planned life. But standing there on the terrace with the Adriatic wind in her hair and this dangerous, complicated man holding her hands, logic seemed irrelevant. "I'll stay," she said, "for a few days. Show me your world, Victor." He pulled her close, kissing her again, slower this time but no less intense. When they broke apart, he rested his forehead against hers. "I'm going to regret this," he murmured. "Probably. You're supposed to argue. Tell me it'll all work out. I'm the smart one, remember. I know better than to make promises I can't keep." She smiled against his lips. "But I can promise I won't run at the first sign of trouble." "What about the second sign?" "We'll see." They stood there for a while, wrapped in each other, the wedding continuing without them. Eventually they'd have to go back, face the questions and curious looks. Marina would have to call her boss, explain she was taking a few personal days. Victor would have to deal with Petar and Davor and all the complications of his transition out of the criminal world. But for now, in this moment, they were just two people who'd found each other in the most unexpected way, standing on a terrace overlooking a city older than memory, daring to believe that maybe, just maybe, something good could come from this beautiful, reckless decision. When they finally returned to the reception, hand in hand, the party was winding down. Petra spotted them and rushed over, her face flushed from dancing and champagne. "Marina, where have you been? Everyone's asking about you and Victor." She lowered her voice conspiratorially. "Is it serious? Because the way you two look at each other—" "It's complicated," Marina said, which was the understatement of the century. "The best things usually are." Petra hugged her. "I'm happy for you, Sestrichina. You deserve someone who looks at you like you hung the moon." As the night drew to a close, guests began to filter out, calling goodbyes and congratulations. Marina found herself reluctant to leave, knowing that when they walked out of this palace, the real complications would begin. Victor seemed to sense her hesitation, having second thoughts. "No, just thinking about what comes next. Next, I take you home. Tomorrow, we start figuring out if this insanity can actually work." He smiled, that dangerous edge returning. "One day at a time, Marina. That's all we can do." "One day at a time," she agreed. They said their goodbyes to Petra and her husband, to Marina's mother, who gave Victor a thorough once-over and a warning that if he hurt her daughter, there would be consequences, to Uncle Tomislav, who pulled Victor aside for a quiet conversation that left both men looking serious. As they walked through the palace gates and onto the moonlit streets of the old town, Marina felt the enormity of what she'd agreed to settling over her. "Where are you staying?" Victor asked. "My mother's, but you'd rather not explain this to her at midnight after a wedding where you showed up with a mysterious boyfriend she'd never heard of before tonight." He guided her toward where a sleek black car was parked. "I have a place in Plocha. You can stay there tonight. Go see your mother tomorrow when you're ready to face the interrogation." "That's presumptuous. You want to go to your mother's right now?" Marina thought about Božena's inevitable barrage of questions, her excitement and worry and determination to know everything about Victor immediately. "No," she admitted. "Then come home with me. I'll take the guest room. No pressure, no expectations. Just a place to sleep where you won't be interrogated." And it was probably a bad idea. Everything about this night had been a bad idea, and yet Marina couldn't bring herself to care. She got into the car, watching the ancient walls of the old town pass by as Victor drove through narrow streets with practiced ease. His apartment was in a modern building overlooking Banje Beach, all clean lines and floor-to-ceiling windows that offered a stunning view of Lokrum Island in the distance. It was nothing like Marina expected. She'd imagined something more ostentatious, more obviously criminal. But this was sophisticated and understated, with bookshelves lining one wall and artwork that looked original. "You really do read," she said, examining the spines. "Krelesia, yes, but also Šimić, Nazor, even some English and Italian classics." "I told you I did." Victor shrugged off his jacket, loosening his tie. In the soft light of the apartment he looked younger, less dangerous. "Wine? Or are you too exhausted from single-handedly convincing your family that we're madly in love?" "Wine sounds good." He poured them both glasses of a local red, and they settled on the balcony, looking out at the dark sea. The October night was cool, but not cold, and Marina pulled her shawl tighter around her shoulders. "Tell me about Zagreb," Victor said. "Your real life, not the edited version you gave the wedding guests." So she did. She told him about her tiny apartment in Trešnjevka, about the publishing house where she worked, about the manuscript she'd discovered and the authors she'd helped shape. She told him about her friends, Ivana, who worked in marketing, Petra, who taught at the university, not her cousin, a different Petra, and the small, comfortable life she'd built for herself. "It sounds nice," Victor said. "Normal." "It is. Safe, predictable, a little boring." Marina glanced at him. "The opposite of tonight." "And which do you prefer?" "I don't know yet. Ask me in a few days, when I've actually seen what your life is like." They talked until the early hours of the morning, and Marina learned more truths about Victor, how he'd tried to go straight after his father's death, how the criminal world had pulled him back in despite his best efforts, how he was genuinely trying to make things right, even if his methods were questionable. He told her about his sister in Split, a doctor who'd cut ties with the family business years ago, and his mother who lived in fear that he'd end up dead like his father. "She'd like you," Victor said. "She's been telling me for years I need to find a good woman, settle down, have a normal life. I'm not sure I qualify as good after agreeing to all this." "You're better than I deserve, Marina Kovač." He said it simply, like stating a fact. "But I'm selfish enough to keep you anyway, if you'll let me." When Marina finally went to the guest room, she found it perfectly appointed, with fresh sheets and towels laid out. But she stood in the doorway for a long moment, thinking about the man in the other room, this dangerous, complicated person who'd somehow become important to her in the span of a single evening. She should be terrified. Should be planning her escape back to Zagreb and her safe, boring life. But instead, she found herself excited for tomorrow, for the chance to see more of Victor's world, to understand what he was fighting for and against. Marina fell asleep with the sound of the Adriatic in her ears and the memory of Victor's kiss still burning on her lips, knowing that when she woke up everything would be different. The morning sun streamed through unfamiliar windows, and for a moment Marina was disoriented. Then memory flooded back. The wedding, Victor, the kiss on the terrace, the promises made under starlight. She sat up, taking in the elegant guest room, and wondered if she'd made the biggest mistake of her life, or the best decision she'd ever made. There was a soft knock on the door. "Marina, are you awake?" "Yes," she called, quickly smoothing her hair. "Come in." Victor entered, carrying a tray with coffee and breakfast, fresh bread, cheese, prosciutto and fruit. He'd changed into jeans and a simple black t-shirt, looking more relaxed than he had at the wedding, but no less handsome. "I wasn't sure what you liked," he said, setting the tray on the bedside table. "So I got a little of everything. This is perfect. Thank you." Marina reached for the coffee gratefully. "What time is it?" "Almost 10. I thought you might want to call your mother. Let her know you're alive and not kidnapped by the mysterious boyfriend. She's going to ask 1,000 questions. Better than her calling the police." Victor sat on the edge of the bed, careful to maintain distance. "Marina, about last night. Are you having second thoughts?" "No. But I want to make sure you're not." In the clear light of day, without the romance of a wedding and the adrenaline of standing up to Petar, does this still seem like something you want? Marina studied him, this man who'd burst into her life with all the subtlety of a storm. She should say no, should thank him for a lovely evening and return to her regularly scheduled life. But looking at him now, seeing the vulnerability beneath the dangerous exterior, she found she couldn't. I'm still here, aren't I? That doesn't answer the question. Yes, she said firmly, I still want this, want to see where this goes, understand your world, be part of whatever you're trying to build. Is that clear enough? Victor's expression softened. Crystal clear. He stood. Then get dressed. I want to show you something. An hour later, Marina found herself on Victor's boat, a sleek vessel named Libertas, heading out into the Adriatic. The October morning was crisp and beautiful, the water sparkling under bright sun. Victor handled the boat with practiced ease, and Marina stood at the bow, letting the wind whip through her hair. "Where are we going?" she called over the engine. "You'll see." They cruised along the coast, passing the distinctive walls of Dubrovnik, the hotels and beaches of Lapad, the rocky shores dotted with vacation homes. Finally, Victor slowed the boat near a small, secluded cove Marina didn't recognize. "My family's land," he explained as they anchored. "Technically my grandfather's, but no one uses it except me. I come here when I need to think." They waded to shore. The water was cold but refreshing, and Victor led her up a narrow path to a stone house perched on the hillside. It was old, probably centuries old, with thick walls and small windows designed to withstand the summer heat and winter storms. Inside, the house was simple but comfortable. Victor lit a fire in the large fireplace and opened the shutters, letting in light and the sound of the sea below. "This is where I'd live if I could," he said, staring out at the view. "Away from the city, the business, all the complications, just this and the sea." "Why don't you?" "Because I have responsibilities, people who depend on me, deals I've made that I have to see through." He turned to face her. "But maybe someday, when this is all over and I've paid my debts." Marina moved to stand beside him. "Tell me about what you're doing. The real story, not the sanitized version." So he did. Victor explained how he'd been working with a government prosecutor named Ana Juric, providing information about trafficking networks in exchange for immunity. He told her about the shipment Petar had mentioned, drugs that Victor had refused to transport, breaking an agreement with Davor Kostic, one of the most powerful crime bosses in southern Croatia. "Davor is old school," Victor said. "He doesn't understand why I'd turn down money, doesn't believe I'm serious about going straight. He thinks I'm angling for more power, trying to take over his territory. And you're not?" "No, I just want out, Marina. I want to wake up without wondering if today's the day someone puts a bullet in me. I want to be able to look my mother in the eye without shame. I want—" He trailed off. "What? A normal life, a family maybe, things I never thought I'd have." Marina took his hand. "You can have those things. Not if Davor gets to me first. Not if this deal with the prosecutor falls through." His grip tightened. "That's why this is dangerous, Marina. Why I tried to warn you off last night. Davor's men are watching me, waiting for me to make a mistake. If they find out about you, they'll use you against me. Then we'll be careful. It's not that simple. Nothing worthwhile ever is." Marina moved closer, looking up at him. "Victor, I'm not some fragile thing that needs protecting. I make my own choices, and I'm choosing this. Choosing you." He kissed her then, pulling her close with an urgency that spoke of fear and hope tangled together. They stayed in the stone house for hours, talking and planning, and Marina felt herself falling deeper into this complicated, dangerous world that was becoming hers. As afternoon shadows lengthened, they returned to the boat. On the trip back to Dubrovnik, Marina called her mother. enduring the expected barrage of questions and providing carefully edited answers. Yes, she and Victor were serious. No, she hadn't kept it secret to be cruel. They'd wanted to be sure. Yes, she would bring him to dinner soon. No, Mama, it's too early to discuss marriage. Please calm down. When she hung up, Victor was grinning. That sounded painful. You have no idea. She's already planning our wedding. Should I be worried? Terrified. But Marina was smiling. Despite everything, the danger, the complications, the absolute insanity of this situation, she felt happy. Truly, genuinely happy in a way she hadn't been in years. That evening, Victor took her to a small konoba in Bruges, away from the tourist areas. The owner greeted him warmly, and they were given a private table in the back, where they could talk without being overheard. Over black risotto and grilled fish, Victor told her more about his plans. The prosecutor, Anna, was building a case against Davor and several other traffickers. Victor's testimony and evidence would be crucial, but timing was everything. We move too soon. Davor bolts or worse, eliminates evidence, Victor explained. Too late, and he gets suspicious about why I'm stalling. The window is narrow. How narrow? A few weeks, maybe a month, then it's done, one way or another. Marina processed this. So I'm staying during the most dangerous time. Which is why I keep telling you to go back to Zagreb. And I keep not listening. She reached across the table. I'm staying, Victor, however long it takes. Your job? I have vacation days, and my boss owes me for covering for her last summer. I can work remotely if needed. Marina smiled. You're not getting rid of me that easily. Victor looked at her with an expression she couldn't quite read, gratitude mixed with resignation and something deeper, more intense. You're either very brave or very stupid. Can't I be both? Apparently. But he was smiling, and when he squeezed her hand, Marina felt the rightness of her decision settle into her bones. The next few days fell into a rhythm. Marina stayed at Victor's apartment, working on manuscripts remotely, while he dealt with business she only partially understood. He introduced her to some of his legitimate operations. A shipping company, a restaurant in the Old Town, a small hotel in Kavtat. These were the businesses he was building, the future he was working toward. But there were darker moments too. Late-night phone calls that had Victor's expression shutting down. Meetings with men who looked at Marina with calculating eyes, weighing her value as leverage. Once, they were followed through the Old Town by one of Davor's men, and Victor's hand on her back became protective, possessive, as he led her through narrow streets until they'd lost their tail. "This is my life," he said afterward, his voice tight with frustration. "This constant looking over my shoulder, wondering who's a threat." "Then let's end it faster," Marina said. "Call Anna, tell her you're ready to move. It's not that simple. We need more evidence, more time. Or you need to stop being so careful and take the risk." Victor stared at her. "You're asking me to put myself in more danger. I'm asking you to stop dragging this out. Every day you wait is another day for something to go wrong." Marina gripped his arms. "You said the window is narrow, so use it. Make the move now, before Davor figures out what you're doing." He was quiet for a long moment, conflict clear on his face. Then he pulled out his phone and dialed. "Anna, it's Victor. We need to meet. Tonight. I'm ready to give you everything." The meeting was set for midnight at a warehouse near Bruges port. Anna didn't want Marina there, but Victor insisted. If he was going to do this, he wanted her by his side. The prosecutor wasn't happy about it, but she agreed. They arrived early, Victor checking sight lines and exits with the thoroughness of someone who'd learned to expect betrayals. Marina tried not to think about what could go wrong, but her mind kept conjuring worst-case scenarios. Anna arrived with 2 federal agents, all business in her severe suit. She was older than Marina expected, maybe 50, with iron-grey hair and eyes that missed nothing. "You're the girlfriend," she said, looking Marina up and down. "Victor speaks highly of you." "He does? Says you convinced him to stop stalling." Anna's expression didn't soften. "I hope you understand what you've gotten yourself into, mlada dama. This isn't a game." "I'm aware. Are you? Because people die in this world. Good people, people with families and futures. Victor's walking a very thin line, and you being here makes it thinner." "Then let's make sure he doesn't fall," Marina said, meeting the prosecutor's gaze. "What do you need from him?" Anna's expression shifted slightly. Respect, maybe, or at least acknowledgement. "Everything. Names, dates, routes, shipment manifests, financial records, communication logs, and testimony when we go to trial." For the next 3 hours, Victor provided it all. He'd been preparing for this moment, Marina realized, even before he'd met her. Files and documents emerged from secure locations. Passwords and access codes were shared. Connections drawn between seemingly unrelated operations. Anna's agents recorded everything, asking clarifying questions, building their case piece by methodical piece. "This is good," Anna said finally. "Better than good. With this, we can take down not just Davor, but 6 other major players. You've done well, Victor. So what happens now? Now we move fast. Arrests within the week, before anyone realizes what's happening." She looked at both of them seriously. "You understand that once this starts, there's no going back. Davor will know you betrayed him. You'll need protection, probably relocation for a while." "I'm not leaving Dubrovnik," Victor said flatly. "Then you're putting yourself at risk. It's my home. I'm not being driven out by men like Davor Kostic." His hand found Marina's. "Besides, I have reasons to stay now." Anna sighed. "Your funeral. But I'll arrange for protection. Agents watching your apartment, your businesses. You follow their rules. Don't take unnecessary risks." "Understood." As they left the warehouse, Marina felt the weight of what they'd just done settling over her. Victor had just signed his own death warrant if anything went wrong, had gambled everything on the government's ability to protect him and bring Davor down before retaliation came. "Having regrets?" Victor asked as they drove through the dark streets. "Should I be?" "Most people would be. I'm not most people." Marina looked at him, this complicated man who'd become her whole world in less than a week. "What happens now?" "Now we wait. Anna makes her moves, we stay safe, and in a few days this is over." He glanced at her. "And then maybe we can have that normal life I was talking about." "You really think it's possible? After all this? With you?" Victor smiled, the expression transforming his face. "Yes, I think anything's possible." They spent the next few days in cautious limbo. Victor's protection detail, 2 federal agents who looked uncomfortable in the Mediterranean sunshine, followed them everywhere. Marina continued working remotely, editing manuscripts while sitting in Victor's living room with armed guards outside the door. It should have felt surreal, but somehow it had become normal. On the 3rd day, Victor's phone rang. His face went pale as he listened. "What is it?" Marina asked as he hung up. "Davor knows. I don't know how, but he knows I've been talking to the prosecutor." Victor was already moving, pulling out a bag and throwing clothes into it. "Anna's moving up the timeline. Arrests are happening tonight, but we need to get somewhere safe until it's done." "Where?" "The stone house, the cove. It's off the grid, and only a few people know about it." He looked at her. "Marina, you need to call your mother. Tell her you're going away for a few days, somewhere with bad cell service. Don't tell her where or why. Victor, please, if Davor's men come looking, I need her to honestly not know where you are." Marina made the call, keeping her voice steady despite her racing heart. Her mother protested, but eventually accepted the explanation that Victor was taking her on a romantic getaway. Bojana's excitement almost made Marina feel guilty for the lie. Within an hour, they were on the boat, racing across dark water toward the cove. The protection detail followed in a separate boat, and Victor kept checking the horizon for pursuit. Talk to me, Marina said, watching his tense shoulders. Tell me what you're thinking. That I should have sent you back to Zagreb when I had the chance. That bringing you into this was selfish and stupid and I wouldn't have gone. Marina moved to stand beside him at the wheel. Victor, look at me. He did, and she saw fear in his eyes, not for himself, but for her. I chose this, she said firmly. Every step of the way I chose this, chose you, and I don't regret it, whatever happens tonight. You should, but I don't. She kissed him, tasting salt spray and fear and something deeper. Now get us to safety so we can live to argue about this later. The stone house felt like a fortress when they arrived. The protection detail secured the perimeter, while Victor locked every door and window. Marina found herself in the same room where he'd told her about his plans, where this had all become real. How long do we wait? She asked. Until Anna calls. Could be hours, could be all night. Victor paced like a caged animal. I should have planned this better, should have had backup plans for the backup plans. You did the best you could. It might not be enough. They waited as darkness fell and stars emerged over the Adriatic. The protection detail reported in regularly, no signs of pursuit, no movement on the water. Anna sent updates via encrypted messages, teams moving into position, first warrant executed, second target secured. At 11 p.m., Victor's phone rang. He answered, listened, and his entire body relaxed. It's done, he said, hanging up. Anna got them. Davor, Petar, 6 others. They're in custody, and the evidence is solid enough that they won't make bail. Marina felt tears sting her eyes. It's really over? The dangerous part, yes. There'll still be trials, testimony, probably some attempts at retaliation by their associates. But the immediate threat... He pulled her close. It's over, Marina. We're safe. She kissed him, tasting relief and joy and the promise of futures they could now plan. So what happens now? Now? Victor smiled against her lips. Now we figure out what normal looks like, together. They stayed at the stone house for 3 more days, enjoying the peace and quiet, talking about possibilities. Victor wanted to focus on his legitimate businesses, maybe expand the hotel in Kavtat, start a sailing charter company. Marina could work remotely, maybe even transfer to a Dubrovnik publisher if one would have her. You'd really leave Zagreb? Victor asked as they sat on the rocks watching sunset paint the sky. For this? For you? Yes. Marina leaned against him. I left once to find myself. Maybe now I'm coming back for the same reason. Your family is going to ask questions, real questions now that we're actually together and not just pretending. Let them ask. I'll tell them the truth mostly. She smiled. That you're complicated and difficult and probably the best thing that's ever happened to me. Even after all this. Especially after all this. When they returned to Dubrovnik, the city felt different. Lighter somehow, as if a shadow had lifted. News of the arrests was everywhere, major crime figures taken down, trafficking networks dismantled. Victor's name wasn't mentioned publicly, but those who knew, knew. He'd be marked as an informant in certain circles, but Anna had kept her promise about protection. Marina finally brought Victor to meet her family properly, not as a pretend date at a wedding, but as the man she was building a life with. Bojana cried and embraced him, extracting promises that he'd take care of her daughter. Uncle Tomislav pulled him aside for a serious conversation about responsibility and family. They like you, Marina said afterward, amused by Victor's slightly overwhelmed expression. Your mother is terrifying. Wait until you meet my grandmother. They fell into a routine. Marina transferred to a small publishing house in Dubrovnik, taking a pay cut, but gaining the freedom to work on projects she cared about. Victor threw himself into his legitimate businesses, rebuilding his reputation one honest deal at a time. It wasn't always easy. Old associates approached him with opportunities. Davor's remaining network made veiled threats, and there were days when Victor questioned whether any of it was worth it. But Marina was there through all of it. Patient when he was frustrated, fierce when he doubted himself, loving through the complicated process of becoming someone new. 6 months after that wedding where they'd met, Victor took her back to the stone house. They'd been spending more time there, talking about maybe renovating it, making it their home. Marina loved the isolation, the sound of the sea, the way sunset turned the water to gold. "I have something to ask you," Victor said as they sat on the terrace. "That sounds ominous." "It's not, I promise." He took her hand, and Marina felt her heart start to race. "6 months ago you saved me, not just from Davor or the life I was trapped in, but from myself. You believed I could be better before I believed it, and you stayed even when any sane person would have run." "Victor, let me finish." He smiled, nervous in a way she'd never seen him. "I love you, Marina Kovač. I love your intelligence and your courage, and the way you argue with me when I'm being an idiot. I love that you took a risk on a man pretending to be your date at a wedding and somehow found something real in the pretense." He pulled out a ring, simple, elegant, a single stone that caught the light. "I know it's fast. I know we've only known each other 6 months, and most of that was dealing with criminal prosecutions and family interrogations. But I also know that I want to spend the rest of my life with you, here in this house by the sea, building something honest and good. So, Marina, will you marry me?" Marina looked at the ring, at Victor's hopeful face, at the stone house that could be theirs, at the Adriatic stretching to the horizon. She thought about the woman who'd sat alone at a wedding 6 months ago, lonely and lost, and the woman she'd become, stronger, braver, deeply and completely in love with a complicated man who was working every day to be worthy of her. "Yes," she said, and Victor's face transformed with joy. "Yes, I'll marry you." He slipped the ring on her finger and kissed her as the sun set over the water, painting their future in shades of gold and possibility. It wasn't the safe, predictable life Marina had planned. It was better, messy and complicated and real, filled with love and challenge and the promise of adventures yet to come. The wedding was small, held at the stone house with close family and friends. Petra stood as Marina's witness, beaming with pride at having introduced them, even if the introduction had been accidental. Victor's mother cried through the entire ceremony. Bojena gave a speech about how she'd known from the first moment at her niece's wedding that Marina and Victor were meant to be together. "She has no idea how right she is," Victor murmured as they danced their first dance as husband and wife. "Or how wrong we were," Marina replied, smiling up at him. "We were anything but meant to be. We chose to be. Even better." Anna Juric attended the wedding, which surprised everyone. She'd brought a gift, a framed photograph of the Dubrovnik coastline, and pulled Victor aside for a private conversation. "The trials are going well," she told him. "Davor's looking at 20 years minimum, and the trafficking networks are still dismantling. You did good work, Victor. I just did what was right. Most people don't. Most people take the easy path, the profitable one." Anna glanced at Marina, who was laughing with her cousins. "You found something worth being better for. Hold on to that." "I plan to." Life settled into a new rhythm after the wedding. Marina and Victor split their time between the stone house and Victor's apartment in the city. She continued her work with the publishing house, discovering a talented young Croatian author whose debut novel she championed. Victor's businesses thrived. The hotel in Cavtat expanded, the sailing charter company launched successfully, and he even opened a bookshop in the old town, partly as a joke about how they'd supposedly met. "It makes the lie true," he said when Marina laughed at the irony. "Now when people ask where we met, we can bring them here and show them." But it wasn't all smooth sailing. There were complications. Victor had to testify at Davor's trial, facing down the man who'd once been his boss with steady courage. Some of Davor's associates made threatening calls, forcing them to maintain security measures. Marina's career advancement was slower than it might have been in Zagreb, and there were moments when she wondered if she'd sacrificed too much. "Having regrets?" Victor asked one evening when he found her staring out at the sea, her expression troubled. "Not regrets. Just thinking about paths not taken, you know." "Tell me." Marina leaned against him. "I got offered a senior editor position in Zagreb. Really good salary, chance to work on major international acquisitions, but it would mean moving back, being there full time." Victor was quiet for a moment. "Do you want to take it?" "No. Yes. I don't know." She turned to face him. "I love my life here. Love you. Love what we're building. But sometimes I wonder if I'm limiting myself, choosing the safe option." "Safe?" Victor laughed. "Marina, you married an ex-criminal informant with active threats on his life. Nothing about this is safe." "You know what I mean." He cupped her face in his hands. "If you want to take the job, take it. We'll figure it out. I can spend time in Zagreb. You can come back on weekends. Your career matters, and I won't be the reason you give up opportunities." "You mean that?" "I mean that I love you enough to make it work, whatever it looks like." He kissed her forehead. "But Marina, can I tell you what I think?" "Please." "I think you're not actually wondering about the job. I think you're wondering if you made the right choice that night at the wedding. If betting on us was smart or stupid." He smiled gently. "And I think that's normal, especially when the excitement fades and reality sets in. But here's what I know. I wake up every morning grateful you took that risk. And if you need reassurance, if you need me to remind you why this matters, I'll do it every day for the rest of our lives." Marina felt tears sting her eyes. "I don't regret choosing you. Sometimes the weight of everything catches up with me. Then let me help carry it. That's what marriage is, isn't it? Sharing the weight." She turned down the Zagreb position, but the conversation opened something between them, a deeper honesty about fears and doubts. They started therapy, both individual and couples, working through the trauma of those dangerous months and the adjustment to their new life. It wasn't always comfortable, but it was necessary. A year after their wedding, Marina discovered she was pregnant. The news came as a surprise. They'd talked about children eventually, but hadn't actively been trying. Victor's reaction was pure joy mixed with terror. "I'm going to be a father," he said, staring at the positive test. "Marina, I don't know how to do this." "Neither do I. We'll figure it out together." "What if I'm terrible at it? What if I mess them up with my past?" Marina took his hands. "You're going to be a wonderful father. You're patient and protective, and you read Krelija, which means you have good taste in literature to pass on." He laughed, but his eyes were wet. "I want to give them everything I didn't have. Safety, stability, a father they can be proud of. They'll be proud of you. I'm proud of you." The pregnancy was difficult. Marina dealt with severe morning sickness for months, and there were complications that required bed rest in the final trimester. Victor became fiercely protective, hovering constantly, driving Marina slightly crazy with his concern. "I'm pregnant, not made of glass," she said one afternoon when he tried to stop her from walking to the mailbox. "The doctor said minimal activity. The doctor said bed rest for a week after the bleeding scare. That was 3 weeks ago, and I've been cleared for light activity." She softened at his worried expression. "Victor, I love you, but you have to let me do things. I can't spend 3 more months in bed. I just want you both safe. We are safe. Now go to work and let me walk to the mailbox without supervision." Their daughter was born on a stormy February evening, arriving 3 weeks early and screaming her displeasure at the world. They named her Katya after Victor's grandmother. She had Marina's green eyes and Victor's dark hair, and from the first moment Victor held her, Marina knew their lives had changed irrevocably. "She's perfect," Victor whispered, tears streaming down his face as he cradled the tiny bundle. "Marina, we made this perfect person." Motherhood was harder than Marina expected. The sleepless nights, the constant worry, the way her body and mind had been transformed by pregnancy and birth, it was overwhelming. She struggled with postpartum depression, days where getting out of bed felt impossible, where she questioned every decision she'd made. Victor was patient through it all. He took over nighttime feedings, hired help when Marina needed rest, and held her through the dark moments when she sobbed that she was failing at everything. "You're not failing," he said firmly. "You're human, going through something incredibly difficult. It doesn't make you a bad mother or a bad wife. It makes you someone who needs support, and I'm here to give it. I don't know why you stay. Because I love you. Because you stayed with me through trials and threats and the hard work of becoming someone new. Because this is what marriage is. Staying through the hard parts, not just the easy ones." Slowly, with therapy and medication and support, Marina found her footing. Katya grew from a screaming newborn into a curious baby, then a toddler with opinions about everything. Victor proved to be a devoted father, reading to her every night, teaching her to swim in the cove, showing her the city he loved with patient enthusiasm. On Katya's 3rd birthday, they held a party at the stone house. Family and friends filled the space. Marina's parents and extended family, Victor's mother and sister, even Anna Juric made an appearance, bringing an absurdly large stuffed animal that made Katya shriek with joy. Marina stood on the terrace, watching Victor help Katya blow out her candles, surrounded by people who loved them. It was so different from that night 4 years ago, when she'd sat alone at a wedding, lonely and lost. "Hard to believe it's been 4 years, Petra said, appearing beside her with a glass of wine. "Since my wedding, I mean. Sometimes it feels like yesterday. Sometimes it feels like a lifetime ago. You two are good together. Really good." Petra smiled. "I'm glad you came to my wedding, even though you didn't want to. So am I." Marina watched Victor lift Katya up, spinning her around as she giggled. "It gave me everything I didn't know I needed." That night, after the guests had left and Katya was asleep, Marina and Victor sat on the terrace under the stars. The Adriatic was calm, moonlight painting silver paths across the water. "Do you ever think about that night?" Marina asked. "The wedding, when we met?" "All the time." Victor pulled her closer. "I think about how close I came to not going, to sending one of my men instead. How different everything would be if I hadn't walked up to that table and asked to sit down." "You didn't ask. You just sat." "Semantics." He smiled. "The point is, I'm grateful for every choice that led me to you. Even the bad ones, even the dangerous ones. They all brought me here. To a stone house with a 3-year-old who refuses to sleep through the night and a wife who still has days where she can barely get out of bed. To a home with a daughter I love more than life itself, and a wife who's the strongest person I know." He kissed her temple. "Yes, Marina, I'm grateful for exactly this." They sat in comfortable silence, listening to the sea and the distant sound of nightbirds. Marina thought about the journey that had brought them here, from that first pretend date to this real, complicated, beautiful life. It hadn't been easy. There had been danger and doubt, therapy sessions and sleepless nights, moments when she'd wondered if they would make it. But they had. Through all of it, they had. "Victor? Thank you for asking me to pretend that night." He laughed softly. "Thank you for saying yes. Even though we're terrible at pretending. Especially because we're terrible at pretending." He turned to face her, his expression serious. "Everything real I have, every good thing in my life, started the moment I stopped pretending to be someone I wasn't. And that started with you." Marina kissed him, tasting salt air and wine and the promise of tomorrow. They'd built something real from a pretend beginning, something that had survived trials and trauma and the hard work of becoming the people they wanted to be. It wasn't perfect. Their lives were still complicated. Victor occasionally dealt with threats from his past. Marina struggled with her mental health. Katya was entering the challenging preschool years, but it was theirs, built on honesty and love and the choice to keep choosing each other every single day. As they went inside, Victor carrying Marina over the threshold like they were newlyweds again, she thought about that lonely woman at the wedding 4 years ago. If she could go back and tell her past self what was coming, the danger, the fear, the joy, the love, would she still take Victor's hand when he asked her to pretend? Yes, Marina thought. 1,000 times yes. Because pretending had led to truth, and that truth had given her everything. Years continued to unfold at the stone house by the sea. Katya grew into a bright, curious child with her father's intensity and her mother's love of stories. She started school in Dubrovnik, making friends quickly and showing an early aptitude for languages that delighted Marina. Victor's businesses continued to thrive. The bookshop became a community gathering place, hosting readings and book clubs. The hotel in Kavtat earned recognition for sustainability practices. The sailing charter company expanded to include educational programs teaching traditional Croatian sailing techniques to children. But more than business success, Victor found peace. The nightmares about his past faded. The constant looking over his shoulder lessened. He became involved in youth programs, using his story, carefully edited, to help at-risk kids find better paths than he'd initially chosen. Marina published her first novel, a thriller set in Dubrovnik that drew on her experiences without revealing too much. It was well received critically, and she began working on a second. Her publishing work continued, but writing became her primary passion, and Victor supported her completely, taking on more childcare duties so she could have uninterrupted time to create. They had their struggles. Victor's mother developed dementia, requiring difficult decisions about care. Marina suffered a miscarriage during a second pregnancy that sent her into a spiral of depression that took months to recover from. Katya struggled with anxiety in second grade, requiring therapy and extra support. Financial pressures hit when a business partner embezzled funds, forcing difficult choices. But through everything, they had each other, and that made all the difference. On their 10th wedding anniversary, Victor took Marina back to the rector's palace, to the exact spot where they'd first danced at Petra's wedding. 10 years, he said, holding her close as a band played nearby. A different wedding, different people, but the same magical atmosphere. A decade since I walked up to a beautiful woman sitting alone and made the best decision of my life. You mean the most reckless decision? That too, he smiled. But I'd do it again, Marina. Every time I'd choose you. Even knowing how hard it would be, especially knowing that. His hand tightened on hers. The hard parts made us stronger. They taught us what love really means, not just the romance and passion, but the staying, the choosing each other when it's difficult, the working through problems instead of running from them. Marina rested her head on his shoulder. I love our life. I love what we've built. Even though it's nothing like you planned, especially because it's nothing like I planned. She looked up at him. Plans are overrated. Sometimes the best things come from saying yes to the unexpected. They danced until the wedding guests looked at them curiously, this couple who clearly weren't part of the party, but moved together with such natural grace. When they finally left, hand in hand, Marina felt the circle completing. From that first dance as pretend partners to this one as true ones, 10 years of history between them. Katya was 13 when she finally asked the question, They were at the stone house for summer vacation, sitting on the terrace after dinner. "How did you and Dad really meet?" she asked, her expression too knowing for her age. "I've heard the bookshop story 1,000,000 times, but there's always something in the way you both look when you tell it, like there's more you're not saying." Marina and Victor exchanged glances. They'd always planned to tell her the truth eventually, but hadn't decided when. "Your mother sat alone at a wedding," Victor said slowly, "and I asked her to pretend to be my date for the evening." Katja's eyes widened. "What? That's so much better than the boring bookshop story." "It's also more complicated," Marina added. "Your father was involved in some dangerous things back then, things he's not proud of." "I know about that," Katja said matter-of-factly. "Grandma told me about how Dad used to work with bad people but became good." Victor looked pained. "My mother told you? She said I should know the truth about who you were and who you are now, that both are part of you." Katja moved to sit between them. "So you pretended to be together, and then what?" They told her the story, age-appropriate version, leaving out the most dangerous details but including the essence of it. How they'd helped each other that night, how pretending had become real, how they'd faced danger and doubt but chosen each other anyway. "That's the most romantic thing I've ever heard," Katja said when they finished, her eyes shining. "You saved each other." We did," Marina agreed, surprised by how emotional telling the story made her. "We absolutely did. I want someone to save me like that someday." "No," Victor said firmly. "I want you to save yourself, and then find someone who enhances that salvation, not creates it. Be complete on your own, Katja. Let love be the addition, not the foundation." "Is that what you did?" He considered. "Not at first. At first, I needed your mother desperately, needed her to believe I could be better before I believed it myself. But over time, we both became whole individually, and that made us stronger together." Katja nodded, processing this. "I'm glad Mom said yes to pretending." "So am I," Victor said, pulling both his girls close. "So am I." The years continued their march. Katja grew into a teenager with her own dreams and challenges. Marina's writing career blossomed, 3 novels published, 1 optioned for film. Victor officially retired from all business dealings with even a whiff of his old life, focusing entirely on legitimate enterprises and philanthropy. They faced new challenges: Katja's first heartbreak, Victor's diagnosis with high blood pressure, Marina's father's death. But they faced them together, this family forged from a pretend beginning into something unshakably real. On their 20th anniversary, they renewed their vows at the stone house. Katja stood as witness, now 18, and heading to university in Split. The ceremony was small, just family, but it felt more meaningful than their first wedding. 20 years ago, I was a lonely woman at a wedding, convinced my best days were behind me, Marina said in her vows. Then a dangerous man sat down beside me and offered me a night of pretending. That pretense became the most real thing in my life. You taught me to take risks, to believe in second chances, to understand that love isn't about perfection. It's about choosing to stay even when things are imperfect. I choose you today, as I've chosen you every day for 20 years, and I'll choose you every day until there are no more days. Victor's vows were simpler, but no less powerful. You saw someone worth saving when I couldn't see it myself. You stayed when any sane person would have run. You built a home with me, raised a daughter with me, weathered storms I brought into your life with grace and strength. You made me want to be better, and then you loved me through the messy process of becoming that better person. I don't know what I did to deserve you, Marina, but I'm grateful for it every single day." They kissed as husband and wife again, 20 years of history in that kiss, and Katja applauded loudly, tears streaming down her face. "You two are disgustingly romantic," she said, hugging them both. "I hope I find what you have someday." You will, Marina assured her, when you least expect it, in the most unexpected way. That night, after Katja had gone to bed, Marina and Victor sat on their terrace one more time. 20 years of memories lived in this space. Late-night conversations, difficult decisions, celebrations, and sorrows. Do you ever wonder what would have happened if you hadn't asked me to pretend that night? Marina asked. All the time, Victor admitted, and it terrifies me, because without that moment, without your crazy willingness to take a risk on a stranger, I don't know where I'd be. Prison, probably, or dead. That's dark, but true. He pulled her close. You gave me a reason to be better, Marina. That's the greatest gift anyone's ever given me. You gave me one too. You reminded me I was brave enough to take risks, strong enough to face danger, worthy of a love that was complicated and real, instead of safe and boring. They sat in comfortable silence, watching moonlight paint patterns on the water. 20 years. 2 decades of choosing each other, building a life, creating something beautiful from a pretend beginning. Victor, Marina said softly. Thank you for whispering to me that night at the wedding. For seeing me sitting alone and thinking I was worth saving. You saved yourself, Marina. I just had the privilege of being there when you did. She kissed him, and in that kiss was every moment they'd shared, the first dance as pretend partners, the first real kiss on a palace terrace, the first terrifying days of danger, their wedding, Katja's birth, every joy and sorrow and ordinary Tuesday in between. They'd built a life from pretense, and that life was more real than anything Marina had ever known. As they walked inside, hand in hand, the stone house embraced them like it always had, a sanctuary they'd created together, filled with love and laughter and the beautiful mess of a life well lived. And if that lonely woman from 20 years ago could see her now, happy, loved, whole, Marina knew she'd be amazed by the journey. By how one moment of saying yes to pretending had led to a lifetime of truth. Some pretenses, after all, are worth believing in, especially when they lead you home.